Hi everybody, it's Miss Annie from the Youth Room at the Wakefield Library. It is Wednesday, it is 2 p.m., so I am back for another Wednesday Read Aloud. We're going to be continuing with Dragons in a Bag by Zetta Elliott today. This is going to be our third week with this book, and I'll read a couple more chapters today, and next week we'll actually be finishing it up with the final chapters of this book. This is all part of our summer programming, which includes weekly programs like this one and some special one-off programs that are happening on Zoom as well. And I did want to let you know real quickly, next week we do have a special Zoom program coming up, and that's Camping at Home for Kids and Families. That's going to be held on Zoom on the evening of Thursday, July 30th. And we're going to invite everybody to set up forts and tents and sort of go on a virtual camping trip with us. We're going to do some crafts, we will sing some songs, we'll play some games, and we'll even be sending out a fun recipe for s'mores dip that my friend Miss Heidi found for us. Registration is required for this event, and you can find out more about that on wakefieldlibrary.org on our calendar. You can find more information about this event as well as all of the other ones that we have coming up as well. So let's go ahead and we'll jump right back into Zetta Elliott's Dragons in a Bag. So when we left off last week, Ma and Jax had just gone to Prospect Park. Jax has found out that Ma is a witch, and she has her purse with her, which is full of dragons, and she's trying to get them back to this magical realm because there's no magic left in Brooklyn, and she's trying to find a place that these dragons will be safe. So they go to Prospect Park, and she meets her friend Ambrose, who is an invisible man, though he's wearing lots of clothing, so it's a little hard to tell, but he is invisible. And Ambrose unlocks a transporter for Ma and Jax, and the transporter looks like a guardhouse that is stationed outside of the park. He lets them know the transporter's been acting a little funny, and he is not kidding, because instead of going to the magical realm where they're supposed to, they end up way back in time in the Mesozoic area. There is a nearby volcano that is erupting, and there's dinosaurs on the ground in the sky. They're not where they're supposed to be. Something starts chasing them in this jungle, and Ma gives her purse with the dragons in it to Jax and sends him back into the transporter. I use my hand for that. Ma actually uses magic because, she's a witch. She can do that. And sends him back in the transporter to modern-day Brooklyn, while she stays behind where there's a dinosaur or something, we don't know what it is, that's chasing her, and she's in the middle of this jungle somewhere in the Mesozoic era. So that's where we left off with Jax, so we'll rejoin him here. He's just flown through time for the second time today, and he's just coming back to Brooklyn with Ma's purse that has the dragons in it. So let's jump back in. Chapter 8. After a sickening loop-de-loop, the guardhouse lands with a thud, and I lift my head, still clutching Ma's purse. A single blue current of electricity snakes up the door closest to me before fizzling out. I get to my feet and carefully extend a finger to test the door. No shock. I can't tell whether the door faces the street or the park, so I just lean my shoulder against it and push as hard as I can. When the door flies open, I tumble out of the guardhouse and land on a patch of earth that's more mud than grass. I get up, brush myself off, and take a moment to look around. I'm definitely in Prospect Park, but what year is it? I sigh with relief when a jogger trots past with a smartphone strapped to her arm and wires leading up to the buds in her ears. I'm home! Then I look at the dirt path leading into the woods and remember that I left Ma behind in the jungle. My eyes fill with tears again, but I quickly blink them away. I'm Ma's helper, and I have to find a way to bring her home too. But I can't do it on my own, and who will help me? I pick up Ma's purse and close the guardhouse door behind me. My heart leaps when I go around the front of the guardhouse and find Ambrose sitting on the stone bench. Through mirrored sunglasses, he's watching the sky, which is still overcast, though it's not raining anymore. When pedestrians walk by, Ambrose ducks his head so that the airy space where his face should be disappears from view. I hurry over to the bench, but then freeze when I realize Ambrose might blame me for what happened to Ma. After all, they've been friends for a really long time. I don't think Ambrose is a witch, but what if he gets angry and refuses to help me? My heart starts beating fast, making it hard to breathe and speak at the same time. So I plant myself on the bench next to Ambrose and blurt out, "Ma's gone, Ambrose. She's gone." Ambrose jumps and shifts on the bench to face me. "Whoa, slow down, kid." I take a deep breath, but I can't calm down. Ma's gone, Ambrose. We have to help her. I know Ma's gone. I sent her on our way, remember? I nod and then shake my head and then nod again. Finally, I take a deep breath and try to make more sense. That's not what I mean. I went with Ma to deliver the dragons, but something happened to the transporter. It took us back in time. Way back, instead of crossing to another dimension. When we landed, there was no magic, but there were plenty of dinosaurs. One attacked us, and that's when My voice dwindles to a whisper, and Ambrose has to lean in to hear me confess. I left Ma behind. For a while, Ambrose doesn't say a word. I see my reflection in the mirror lenses of his sunglasses. I look as scared and guilty as I feel. Ambrose finally raises his gloved hand to scratch the place where his chin should be. He says thoughtfully. Sounds like you need a guide. Someone to steer the ship, so to speak. And it has to be someone who can navigate between dimensions. Another witch? I ask hopefully. Not quite, says Ambrose, but he's the best man for the job. He's the only man for the job, really, so let's hope he's in town. Say there were dinosaurs in this other place? I nod and glance at the harmless pigeons strutting along the sidewalk. It's hard to believe that today's birds are the last of the dinosaurs. We were in a jungle, and there was an erupting volcano, and I climbed down a cliff to get Ma's sparkling stone. Quartz, she called it? Even though he has no face, somehow I know that Ambrose is smiling. Ah, quartz, he says. That changes everything. Ambrose points at Ma's purse and asks, what else did she have on her when you, got separated? I think for a moment. She had her cane and her pocket watch. That was in her coat pocket. Not fully armed, but well equipped, Ambrose says. Then he asks, you know any dinosaur experts? I nod eagerly. My friend Vic knows a lot about dinosaurs, more than anyone I know. Ambrose sifts through his many pockets before producing 2 sleek silver phones. Here, he says as he offers one to me. You call your people, I'll call mine. That's how we're going to fix this, Jax. Teamwork. I take the phone from Ambrose. It's not locked, so I go ahead and tap out Vic's number. The phone rings several times before Vic's little sister, Kavita, picks it up. Is Vic there? I ask her. This is Jackson. I have to talk to him right away. Just a moment, please, Kavita says softly. It feels like forever, but only a few seconds pass before Vic picks up the phone. Hey, Jax, he says in his usual friendly voice. What's up? Out of habit, I say, not much. Then I remember there's a lot going on right now. I'm just not sure where to begin. Vic makes it easy for me. Where are you? He asks. It sounds kind of loud. Whoever's on the other end of Ambrose's call must have a good sense of humor because he's got Ambrose cracking up. I move a few feet away and say, I'm at Prospect Park, Vic. Can you come out? I really need your help, like, now. Vic doesn't say anything, and for a moment I worry he's going to turn me down. Then I realize Vic's got his hand over the phone so I can't hear the conversation he's having with someone else. I could probably sneak out before dinner, but my little sister says she'll tell on me unless I bring her along. Is that okay? What we need right now is a grown-up, not a little kid. But Ambrose is still laughing into his phone, so that must mean he's got another adult lined up to take Ma's place. Sure, Vic, no problem. Can you come right away? I'm at the entrance on Flatbush across from the Botanic Garden. I know the one, Vic assures me. Be there in 15 minutes, Jax. Thanks, Vic. You're a lifesaver. I hang up and think about what I just said. Lifesaver. I don't know if Ma's life needs saving or what a couple of kids could even do to help her right now. But another burst of laughter from Ambrose gives me hope. He holds the phone to his ear even though it's covered by the red toque pulled over his invisible head. 2 baseball caps are stacked on top of the toque, and the fedora wobbles at the top as Ambrose laughs. Thanks, man. I gotta go, but I'll tell the kid to wait here for you. What's that? You can't miss him, Trub. He's got your crazy eyebrows. Ambrose laughs again and ends the call before slipping the phone back into his pocket. I hand him the second phone, and he puts it in another pocket before leaning back on the bench. Whew, I think we're set, kid. I called in a favor from an old friend. Name's Trub. He can't wait to meet you. Why, is he mad at me? I ask nervously. Mad? Of course not. Matter of fact, Trub's a not-so-distant relative of yours, kid. He'll be happy to see you. There are a lot of things I want to ask about Trub, but I settle on the most important question. Will he know how to find Ma? I ask. Ambrose nods and manages to catch his fedora before it topples off his head. If she wants to be found, Trub will find a way to reach her. Wants to be found? What do you mean? She's not hiding from us, Ambrose. I left her behind. Tears spring to my eyes, but I manage to stop them from trickling down my cheeks. I can't stop my nose from running, though, so I open Ma's purse and fish around for her packet of tissues. Ambrose uses one of his gloved hands to pat me on the back. Don't be so sure, and don't be so hard on yourself, kid. The transporter misfires now and again, but Ma doesn't make mistakes. Could be this is all part of her plan. Plan? How could she plan to send me back alone? There were dinosaurs, Ambrose, real dinosaurs. Ma wouldn't choose to stay behind in a place like that, would she? Ambrose shrugs. Hard to say. But if Ma thought you could do something on your own, she might have sent you back so she could deal with other matters. I think about that for a moment. Maybe Ma sent me back alone because she trusted me. I do have the dragons after all, and keeping them safe is a big responsibility. But I was supposed to help her, I say meekly. Ambrose chuckles again. You're helping her now, kid. I'm glad Ma's got such a loyal assistant. It's hard to find good help these days. Ambrose heaves himself to his feet. Listen, I gotta shove off, but Trouble's on his way. You sit tight. He'll make everything right. Just you wait and see. The man I'm waiting for is called Trouble. I feel like I've had as much trouble as I can handle for one day, but I still thank Ambrose for his help and wave as he pushes his cart away. I hold Ma's purse on my lap and hope that Vic gets here soon. I'm not sure how to tell him about Ma, so I practice telling my story in my head until I see Vic coming up the block holding his sister's hand. I set Ma's bag down on the bench and stand up to wave at Vic. His sister has her nose buried in a book, but I still say hi once she's close enough to hear me. Kavita barely glances at me before slipping off her book bag and taking a seat next to Ma's purse on the bench. I recognize Kavita's book bag because Vic had the same one a couple years ago. It has green plates on it to mimic the spine of a dinosaur. I didn't know Kavita was also into dinosaurs, but 2 experts are better than 1. What's with the bag? Vic asks with a smirk on his face. I'm so busy thinking about Kavita's book bag that it takes a second for me to realize Vic's talking about Ma's purse. It's not mine, I tell him. It belongs to, a friend of mine. And she asked you to hold her purse? Vic asks suspiciously as he looks around for my mystery friend. Not exactly, I reply. This is gonna sound crazy, Vic, but I swear everything I'm about to tell you is true. Vic just laughs and says, strange things happen all the time on my block. I could tell you some stuff you'd find hard to believe. Like what? I ask skeptically. Vic glances at his little sister, but she seems absorbed in her book. You know Carlos and Tariq, right? Sure, they're in Mr. Benson's class, I say. Right, well, a few months ago, they were fixing up the backyard of this rundown house on Barclay Street, and they found a phoenix. No way! It's true, Vic insists. We found a picture of it in the Brooklyn Museum. We tried to take care of it, but it was nearing the end of its life, so... Vic looks over at his little sister and decides to not finish his sentence. But I need to know the fate of the phoenix. So what happened? I ask him. Vic leans in and says, it went up in flames. But that means a new phoenix was born from the ashes. I haven't seen it yet, but I keep my eyes open just in case. You never know what you might find in Brooklyn. I don't know what to say. Ma said magic was leaving the city, but maybe she was wrong. Or maybe Ma was right and Vic's baby phoenix had to find somewhere else to live. The best part about Vic's story is that I've never heard it before, which means he knows how to keep a secret. So, Vic says, what's your unbelievable story? I make sure Kavita is still engrossed in her book. Then I step closer to Vic and say, my friend's missing, and she's a witch. Vic doesn't blink, so I go on. She received an important package from Madagascar and instructions to take good care of what was inside. And what was inside? Vic asks. 3 dragons. This time, Vic's eyes grow wide. Actual dragons? I nod, but then confess, well, I haven't seen them, but that's what Ma said. She saw them? Not exactly. Ma kept them in the dark because there's this thing called imprinting. Vic nods like he doesn't need an explanation. And your friend didn't want the dragons to get attached to a human. Smart move. So where are the dragons now? I point at Ma's bag over on the bench. Then my heart skips a beat. The first thing I notice is that Kavita is no longer reading her book. The second thing I notice is that the familiar red mint tin is on her lap and it's open. No! I cry, but it's too late. Not only are the 3 tiny dragons peering out of the tin, Kavita is feeding them. Cavi, what are you doing? Vic asks. Sharing my snack, she replies, without even looking at her brother. Vic and I draw closer to get a better look at the dragons. They're so tiny that they must have had plenty of room inside Ma's mint tin. 2 have wings, and one has a long body with plates along its curved spine, feathers that circle the necks of the strutting pigeons. The dragons look harmless, then they purr happily as they eat the crumbs Kavita is sharing with them. I point at the plastic sandwich bag on Kavita's lap. Inside are 2 round ivory-colored cakes. One is whole, and the other has been broken into pieces by Kavita so that she can feed the hungry dragons. I remember what Ma said about not giving dragons marshmallows. What's in that bag? I ask anxiously. That's pita, Vic explains. My aunt brought us some from her shop in Queens. I'd never heard of pita, but the dragons can't get enough of it. Kavita laughs as they nip at her fingers and jostle for more. Ma said newborn dragons love sticky sweet things, I tell Vic. They'll love pita, he says. It's made from milk, sugar, and cardamom. Vic reaches into his sister's bag and takes out the cake that's still whole. A sliced green pistachio nut has been pressed into its center. Vic breaks the cake and hands me half of it. Try it. Vic pops half of the pita into his mouth. I take a small bite at first, but then quickly cram the rest in my mouth. It's so good. For a moment, none of us say a word as we savor the sweet, creamy cake. But as the sugary sweet dissolves, I realize we have an even bigger problem now. The dragons are gazing up at Kavita with adoration. And I could be wrong, but it looks like they're a little bit bigger than they were 5 minutes ago. I don't want to go off on a little girl, so I start with a simple question. Hey, Cavi. How did you find the dragons? I ask. I need a napkin, so I looked in your purse. It's not my purse, I tell her. It belongs to Ma. Cavi rolls her eyes and says, Whatever, I was looking in your mom's purse when I heard something crying, Dragons don't cry, Vic says irritably. How do you know? Kavita asks in a voice that sounds just as annoyed. They sounded sad, so I opened the tin and gave them some of my snack. I look at Vic, and he looks at me before sighing heavily. I'm guessing this isn't the first time his little sister has caused so much trouble. She might be faking it, but Kavita gives us an innocent look and asks, What's the big deal? You had no right to poke around in Jackson's purse, Vic says angrily. It's not my purse, I remind him. That's right, it belongs to a witch. Vic hisses that last word, and Kavita's eyes grow wide. But you meddled with her dragons, and now they think you are their mother, Vic tells her. I don't mind, Kavita says while stroking the wingless dragon under its chin. The 2 winged dragons get jealous and clamor for her attention, rubbing against her arm, like cats. I mind, I exclaim. Then I look around at the people going in and out of the park and realize I need to keep it down. Those dragons aren't supposed to be here, I tell Cavi. They were supposed to be delivered to someone else, but now you've ruined everything. If Kavita feels bad about what she's done, she sure doesn't show it. Vic picks up the red tin and holds it in his palm. Put them back in, Cavi. Now. Kavita frowns. They don't want to stay inside that horrible little tin. It doesn't matter what they want, I cry. They need to stay hidden until we can find Ma and deliver them to the right dimension. Just put them back, Cavi, or I'll tell Mummy you were going through a stranger's bag. That works. Cavi puts all 3 dragons in her palm and lifts them to her mouth to give each one a kiss. Then she sets them in the tin one by one. But when Vic tries to close the lid, the dragons screech and howl like they're in pain. I snatch the tin from Vic and try to force it shut. Stop, you're hurting them, Kavita cries. Vic sighs and says to me, I think you're going to need a bigger tin, Jax. He's right. Just a few crumbs of pita have led to a dragon growth spurt. We're going to need a larger container. What about the plastic bag, I ask. Let's put them in there for now and zip it up. Vic grabs the bag with the leftover pita from his sister's lap. He takes out the crumbling cake and offers it to me. I shove the pita in my mouth and then dump all 3 dragons from the tin into the little bag. But as soon as they start eating the crumbs sticking to the bottom of the bag, their scaly, writhing bodies start to grow some more. Ouch! Vic cries before dropping the bag on the ground. I snatch it up from the ground and see that one corner of the plastic bag has melted. Uh-oh, I say. I think these are fire-breathing dragons. I unzip the bag and a wisp of smoke rises from the mouth of the wingless dragon. We need something fireproof, Vic suggests. I might have something at home. I shake my head and watch the dragons as they flick their forked pink tongues over the few pita crumbs left in the plastic bag. I don't have time. Trouble's on his way. Vic gives me a funny look. Trouble? That's Ma's replacement, I tell him. You and your sister don't have to save Vic. I honestly don't know what's going to happen next. Vic puts a reassuring hand on my shoulder and says, well, we'll wait with you and find out. What will you do with the dragons? Kavita asks as she gets up from the bench. That's up to Jackson, not you, Vic snaps at his sister. You need to learn to mind your own business, Cavi. Cavi turns away in a huff and unzips her own bag to place her book inside. I take up Ma's purse and search inside for another container. When I can't find a suitable replacement for the mint tin, I unzip the side pocket and put the sandwich bag inside. Then I close the side pocket and click the latch that holds Ma's purse closed. Sorry about my sister, Vic says. I should have kept a closer eye on her. I turn around and shrug wearily. Don't worry about it, Vic. It's been a crazy kind of day, I tell him. I look up the block and see a tall man with a bushy gray beard and furry gray eyebrows coming our way. And it's not over yet. The tall man holds out his hand before he reaches us, but with 3 long strides, he's standing right in front of me. You must be Jax, he says with a big smile that reveals a gold tooth. I'm Charlie Randall, but my friends call me Trub. Chapter 9. Who do we have here? Trub asks. I notice that his eyes gleam along with his gold tooth whenever he smiles. This is my friend Vic and his sister Kavita. Trub shakes both their hands, then points to the bench and says, Why don't we sit down? I can think on my feet, but we can make a better plan if we put our heads together. I sit down first. Trub sits on one side of me and Vic sits on the other. Kavita holds Ma's purse on her lap and sits on the far end of the bench. I notice she leaves a lot of space between herself and her brother. So, Trub says as he rubs his hands together, what can I do for you, Jax? I know it's rude to stare, but I can't stop looking at Trub's bushy eyebrows. The gray and white hairs far outnumber the black ones, but there's no denying his eyebrows look a lot like mine. I want to ask him how we're related, but first I need to answer his question. Ambrose said you could navigate between dimensions. Ma tried to do it, but something went wrong with the transporter. I point to the guardhouse behind us, and Trub nods like he understands. What's a transporter? Asks Cavi, but Vic shushes his sister. Mind your business, Cavi. She sulks and turns away from us while I finish telling my story to Trub. Vic listens closely but doesn't say a word. When I reach the end, Trub strokes his bushy beard and thinks for a moment. So there are 2 things we have to do. Deliver the dragons and find Ma. Which one do you want to do first? Find Ma, I say without hesitation. When I left her, she was in trouble. Ma's got a nose for trouble, he says with a chuckle. That's how she found me. Of course, there are different kinds of trouble. What's Ma up against this time? A dinosaur, I think. Vic grabs my arm. A real dinosaur? I understand Vic's excitement, but this isn't a story I'm proud to share. Well, there was something moving in the jungle, following us, and then just as it was about to attack, Ma sent me back. Alone. I don't suppose you 2 figured out where you were in time, Trub says doubtfully. I think back to what Ma says when she checked her compass. Ma thought it was the Mesozoic era. Triassic period? Vic asks. Jurassic? Maybe? What kind of creatures did you see? Trub asks. I wasn't trying to get up close and personal with anything in that world, but there were pterodactyl flying in the sky, I tell him. They lived from the late Triassic to the Cretaceous period, though. Technically, they're not dinosaurs, Kavita says in a know-it-all sort of way. They're flying lizards, Vic explains. Lizards? I think for a moment, then slip off my book bag. I pull out Elroy's massive book and show it to Trub. Ma loaned me this, and the man who wrote it is the one who sent the dragons from Madagascar. Trub takes the book from me and opens it up. Elroy Jenkins. I haven't heard that name in a while. I thought he was in Australia, not Africa. Vic checks his watch and stands up. I wish I could stick around, Jax, but it's almost time for dinner. I think we better head home. Is there anything else you need? Just one more thing, Vic. How long did pteranodons stick around before they went extinct? Over 100 million years, Kavita replies, even though I wasn't asking her. Anything else? I check with Trub, who shakes his head. Thanks for coming out, Vic, I say. Anytime, Jax, he replies. I hope you find your... Ma. Let's go, Kavita. Vic's little sister gets up from the bench and reluctantly hands over Ma's purse. Vic nudges her and says, Kavita wants to tell you something, Jax. I look at her for a long time, but she doesn't say a word. Vic nudges her again, harder this time. Kavita sighs and looks at her shoes. I'm sorry about what happened before, she says quietly. I feel kind of bad for yelling at her, so I say, don't worry about it, and thanks for sharing your snack with all of us. Kavita smiles at me and then takes her brother's hand. I watch as they walk down the block, the fabric plates on Kavita's dinosaur bag flapping in the breeze. I figured Trouble and I will get back into the transporter, but he surprises me by asking, you hungry? I haven't had anything to eat since choking down that peanut butter sandwich that Ma made for me this morning. I want to say yes, but it feels wrong to put my stomach ahead of Ma. Yeah, but shouldn't we get back to Ma? I ask uneasily. Trouble puts his hand on my shoulder and looks me square in the eye. Ma's gonna be all right, son. I know this business is new and strange to you, but I've been doing it on and off for 20 years, and if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that Ma can take care of herself. I think back to the moment in the jungle when Ma pointed her cane at the guardhouse. Before the door closed, Ma's eyes had locked on mine. Even with the wild creature charging toward her, Ma didn't look afraid. Ambrose thinks Ma sent me back on purpose, I tell Trub. Of course she did, he replies. Ma ain't perfect, but she also don't make no mistakes, if you know what I mean. I didn't, but I nod anyway, and Trub went on. Could be she sent you back for a reason. Maybe to meet me. Trub laughs, and his gold tooth catches the sun, which is finally starting to come out. One thing I know for sure is we can't work on an empty stomach. Let's grab a burger to go, Trouble says. We can even eat on the way if you like. I imagine myself trying to eat while swooping and swerving inside the transporter. Then I picture myself puking all over Trub in the cramped guardhouse. Maybe we should eat first, I suggest. Trouble nods and steers me up the block with his hand still on my shoulder. Mama doesn't usually let me eat fast food, but there's a burger joint right across the street, and that's where we're heading. I walk alongside Trub, wanting to ask a dozen questions, but not knowing where to start. Ambrose says we're related, I say shyly as we wait for the light to change. That's right, Trouble says with his gold-toothed smile. I've wanted to do this for years. Do what? I ask. Take my grandson out for a burger. The light changes, but I don't step off the curb. Instead, I turn to take a closer look at Trub. There's definitely a strong resemblance, but if he really is my grandfather, why hasn't Mama ever mentioned him to me? After my daddy died, Mama made it seem like it was just the two of us against the world. And I liked it that way because I knew I could count on her to be there for me. I always figured Mama was such a good mother because her own parents weren't there for her when she was my age. If she couldn't count on her father back then, why should I trust him now? Trub watches me as if he can see all the questions swirling in my mind. He smiles and gives my shoulder another squeeze. I sure am glad to see you, son, though I wish we could have met under different circumstances. You probably got a lot of questions for me, so how about we get some grub and then start catching up? That sounds like a reasonable plan, so I save my questions until we're back on the stone bench in front of the guardhouse, eating greasy burgers and fries. So, where have you been? I mean, Mama never told me I had a grandfather living in Brooklyn. Trub takes a long sip of soda and then rattles the ice left in the cup. Well, I can't say or blame her. I've been in and out of the city for the past 20 years. A rolling stone, if you know what I mean. I don't, but I solved the riddle myself instead of asking Trub for an explanation. Stones don't usually roll, so I figured Trub must mean that he wasn't around much when Mama was young. I pretty much knew that already, so I move on to my next question. Are you, like, a witch or a warlock? Trub shakes his head and brushes crumbs out of his beard. I ain't had no particular kind of training. Nothing formal, at least. And no training means no title. But that don't bother me. I just help out whenever and wherever I can. Ma, she calls me Trouble Man, or Trub for short. Is that 'cause you get into trouble a lot? I ask. Trub doesn't answer right away. He balls up the foil wrapper from his burger and stuffs it inside the grease-stained paper bag that's between us on the bench. Well, Jax, he says finally, sometimes I find trouble, and sometimes trouble finds me. I expect Trub to smile or wink at me like he usually does, but this time my grandfather just sighs. There's a song by the same name. Don't suppose you've heard it. Came out long before your time. How's it go? I ask. Trub crumples up the bag of trash and aims for the garbage can a few feet away. He makes the shot, but Trub still doesn't smile. It's by a great musician named Marvin Gaye. He was very talented, but also very troubled. In his song, he says, "There's only 3 things that's for sure: taxes, death, and trouble." I suck the last of my soda through the straw. Then I burp and say, "That sounds like a really depressing song." Trub smiles. "It's got a good beat. You like jazz?" I shrug. I think my daddy used to listen to jazz records, but Mama doesn't play them anymore. Trub says, "One of these days I'll play that song for you. It might sound depressing, but it's really about not letting life get you down." I nod and gather up what's left of my meal. My aim's not that great, so I carry it over to the trash can, but before I get there, the biggest rat I've ever seen scurries across my path. I holler and jump back. The rat's heading straight for Trub, but he doesn't seem concerned. In fact, he pats the spot where I was sitting on the bench and grins when the rat hops up and puts his front paws on his leg. There are plenty of rats in Brooklyn. They're dirty and nasty and carry disease. Remember the plague? So I definitely keep my distance. I'm expecting this giant rat to take a bite out of my grandfather's leg. But instead he asks, "Hey, Trub, got any grub?" "You too late, Nate. Grub's gone. Where you been?" The rat puts one paw on his hip and looks like he's ready to tell Trub a long story until he sees me. Or rather, the uneaten food in my hands. "Hey, kid," the rat calls out. "You gonna eat that?" I shake my head and set my leftovers on the ground. I barely have time to pull my hand away before Nate hops off the bench and starts devouring my cold fries. When a hungry pigeon tries to steal a bit of hamburger bun smeared with ketchup, Nate rushes at the poor bird and sends it squawking. I slip back onto the bench and ask, "Friend of yours?" Trub nods and says, "Me and Nate go way back. He's no ordinary rat." I watch the rat greedily gobbling down my leftovers and try to see what makes Nate so special. Trub can tell I'm not impressed. "Nate's got a nose like no other," he explains. "All rats can sniff out food, but Nate..." Trub pauses to beam at his rodent friend. "Nate's got a nose for magic." "Magic has a smell?" Nate stops eating and looks at me over his shoulder. "Everything has a smell, kid. Magic, joy, fear, regret. All of it can be detected if you've got the right nose." He taps his snout with one claw before rising up on his haunches to sniff the air. "What do you smell, Nate?" Trub asks. The rat turns away from us and sniffs again. "Strange. There's a trace of envy in the air, and something else." Nate sniffs again and then looks at us. "I smell a thief," he says in a grave voice. I tighten my hold on Ma's purse and glance around nervously. Trub frowns. "Close by?" he asks. Nate shakes his head and strokes his whiskers. "Long gone." Then he grins and rubs his paws together. "But I do love a challenge. Gotta run, Trub. Thanks for dinner, kid." Nate scurries over to the curb and disappears inside the sewer. "Can he really smell a thief down there?" I ask Trub. He nods and gets to his feet. I pick up my trash off the ground and place it in the can. When I turn around, Trub surprises me by saying, "When Nate said he could smell regret, he was talking about me." "What do you regret?" I ask. "So many things," Trub says, slowly shaking his head. I sure was sorry to hear about your daddy, Jax." My cheeks start to burn, and suddenly I want nothing more than to be squeezed inside the dark guardhouse, hurtling through time. I stand before Trub with my eyes glued to the ground. He reaches out a hand and gently runs his thumb along my eyebrows, the way Mama does sometimes. I look at my grandfather and ask, "How did you find out?" "I may not be around all the time, but I always keep tabs on you and your mama." "You weren't at the funeral," I say softly, hoping to hide the accusation in my heart. "I was there, but I thought it was best for me to keep a low profile. A funeral isn't really the right time for a family reunion. And the last time we talked, your mama made it clear that she didn't want me interfering in her life." "Mama said that?" Trub nods. "That was over 10 years ago, before you were born." I can't say I blame her. You see, I couldn't always find steady work when your mama was a little girl, and that meant she had to go without some things sometimes. Plus, I had some buddies who were kind of shady, and I got mixed up in their mess. But when Ma introduced me to the realm of magic, everything changed. For the first time in my life, I felt like I really belonged. I was useful again. Ma believed in me, and that made it easy to believe in myself. I thought I could just wrap up that and the world and rainbow and give it to Alicia. But she didn't want no part of it. Or me after that. If you knew Mama didn't like magic, why did you leave her with Ma? I didn't, but my wife, your granny, she got the wrong end of the stick when it came to me and Ma, and so she dropped Alicia right in the middle of it. Some folks fear magic, Jax, black magic especially. But in the other realm, there is no black or white. There's less fear and more wonder. Trub smiles to himself. I thought my little girl would be like that girl in the book, Alicia in Wonderland. But I was wrong. My baby girl didn't see all the beauty, just the strangeness. I felt like Trub's talking in riddles again. This time I asked for help. Wait a minute, are you saying you took Mama to another dimension when she was a little girl? Trub nods. Just once, but once was all it took. She took a look around, shut her eyes as tight as she could, and demanded I take her back home. I can't wait to see the realm of magic. At least, I'm curious about what it's like. It's hard to imagine my brave mother being so scared. But then I remember how terrified I was when Ma accidentally took me to the land of dinosaurs. If the magical realm has dragons, maybe Mama felt the same way. Trub looks pretty miserable, so I try to think of something that will make him feel better. Ma says Mama just wanted to be ordinary, I tell Trub. He nods as if that makes sense to him. Maybe so. What about you, Jax? What do you want? I think for a moment. Does Trub know that Mama and I are about to lose our home? Would he approve if I told him I wanted to become Ma's apprentice? I don't know the answers to those questions, so I just say, I want to find Ma and make sure she's okay, and then I want to help her deliver the dragons. Trub claps his hands together and gets up from the bench. Then that's what we better do. You ready to go? I nod and hold Ma's purse close to my chest. It feels lighter than before, but then I remember what's missing. I don't have Ma's compass, I tell Trub. She had it on her when we got separated. That's good. She'll need it to find her way around, he says. Trub reaches into his pants pocket and pulls out a silver watch. I got my own, so if you got the dragons, we're all set. We're missing something else. I scan the street for a scruffy homeless man pushing an overflowing grocery cart. Don't we need Ambrose to open the door? I ask. Trub winks at me, and his gold tooth flashes between his smiling lips. As it happens, picking locks is one of my specialties. And that is where I'm going to stop for today with Dragons in a Bag, and we will finish this book up next week on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Thank you so much for joining me for another Wednesday Read Aloud. I will see you again next week. Bye, everybody.